Welcome to Module 6, Lesson 1. Our I can statement is, I can use visual models and equations to represent division problems. So we're going to be focusing back in on some of the basics of how to represent a division equation. Number 1, Teresa fills 42 water balloons for a water balloon race. Each player needs 3 balloons. How many players are in the race? Use counters or tiles to represent the problem. Then draw a visual model to show your work. So if you have counters, tiles, anything to move around, you're welcome to use that, or you're welcome just to draw your visual representation. So I know that she's going to have 42 water balloons total, and each player will need 3. So I'm going to go ahead by starting out with drawing my 42 water balloons. You can go ahead and draw your 42 water balloons. I'm going to draw them with groups of 3 just to help me keep it organized and also to keep my count to 42. I can skip count using 3s. So there were 6, and then I would have 9, 12, 15, and so on. Okay, so go ahead and draw your representation on your page. Go ahead and pause the video if you need more time drawing your 42 water balloons, and press play when you're ready. Okay, great. So I have my 42 balloons, and I've divided them so that each player has 3. I need to find how many players there are. So I'm going to go ahead and count my groups of 3. 1, 2, 3. You can circle them like this, just to keep it really clear and organized, or if you drew it differently, it might be easier for you to see. Okay, but I have an array of 12 right there, and 13, 14. So I know that in the race, there are 14 players. So P for players, there are 14 of them. Okay, let's go ahead and answer the questions now. A, how did we represent the number of balloons that Teresa filled? Depending on how you did it, right? Mine was the number of dots, right? We drew 42 dots to show 42 balloons. So you can say I drew 42 dots for the 42 balloons. Letter B asks us, how do we represent the balloons each player needed? So those were our equal groups. I circled mine. Maybe you drew yours in little clumps of 3. So however you represented your groups of 3, your equal groups, that's how you're answering letter B. So mine would be, I circled equal groups of 3 for each player. And letter C asks us, how can you use your representation to find the number of players? So how do we know, right? We already answered that on the previous section, that there were 14 players. How did we know that? We know that there were 14 equal groups of 3. Therefore, there had to be 14 players, each with 3 of the 42 water balloons. So, how can you use representation? I counted my equal groups of 3 to find the number of players. So if you had little clumps of 3, right, you might have said you counted the clumps of 3. You found that you had 14 groups of 3. How many players in the race? There are 14 players. And then for this bottom section, just write it right next to this yellow square. What is our division equation? Go ahead and write it. And check. It is 42 divided by 3 equals 14. All right, number 2. A memory game requires 55 cards. Beth places the cards in 5 equal rows. How many cards are in each row? Use base 10 blocks to represent the problem, and then use the quick picture to solve the problem. So it's already given us the quick picture over here. If you have base 10 blocks available to you, you're welcome to also build this, right? 55 that's in 5 rows. Otherwise, we can just reference this image right over here. So letter A asks us, how does the quick picture represent the problem? Well, what does the quick picture show us? Right? It shows us the number 55, and it shows us it in tens and in ones. It also shows us 5 equal rows. So it represents the problem with 5 tens, 5 ones. You could say placed in 5 rows. And then letter B asks us, how does the quick picture show the answer? Well, we're looking at 55 cards in 5 equal rows. How many cards are in each row? Well, if we look at it, does it show us how many cards would be in each row? Right? It shows us that one row would have 1 10 and 1 1. So you could say it shows each row has 1 10 and 1 1. Or how many cards would that be? 11. So what would our equation be? We started with 55 cards for the memory game, and those 55 cards are placed in 5 equal rows. So 55 cards divided into 5 equal rows would equal 11 cards in each row. So let's go ahead and answer question D. How many cards are in each row? 11 cards. All right, go ahead and pause the video and complete check understanding and press play when you're ready to check your work. All right, let's go ahead and check your work. For number 1, we get the answer that there are 12 players on each team. Now, if this was feeling a little tricky on how to draw a visual model, let me go through that just one more time. So 48 players, 4 equal teams. We want to think about that being team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4. So split it into tens and ones. 1 10, 2 tens, 3 tens, 4 tens. I don't have any more tens to distribute, so now I'll move on to my 8 ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That way I can then look at my representation here, right? And that representation is 12. Okay, so the same thing goes for our second one. This is 12 players. So each player makes 31 shots. Okay, same thing. I had, this would be our 3 that we're dividing by. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we distribute our 10s and then our 1s.